Hey guys, it's Reset Sniper here coming at you on the weekend. The horrible housing blunder, says The Economist. The Economist, this Western obsession with home ownership. As I've said before, the controlled entity that is The Economist and their Bolshevik agenda of turning everyone into tenants who can be rentally extracted against will continue to be a major theme. These guys want you out of your homes. They want to tax them. They'll put forthcoming, I expect, will be draconian taxation on people who are homeowners, wealth taxes, potentially annual levies, higher inheritance tax potentially on already taxed income, where those have been paid on private ownership of homes. It's my express view that the framing that these guys go about underlies the agenda that they are pushing, and it's quite clear it's to get the goyim off the land and out of the property, and as slave tenants in their boxes that are provided for them by their masters and puppeteers. The West's obsession with home ownership. So now it's a bad thing for owning a home. The consequence of this warped housing policy that promotes owner occupation, it's like promoting this bad thing, owner occupation, over renting. Wow, didn't realize it was such a bad thing. Dysfunctional housing markets prevent vibrant cities from growing. No, they don't. Planning and slow release of land for further property development stops the availability of home ownership. Nothing else. And you need to open up land, and you need a building boom. If you're short and your population is growing and your property stock is not growing at the same rate as you are taking in immigrants into your Western nations, because being a white successful Western nation is the only nation that is clearly racist and doesn't accept all the renegades from all the war-torn countries, or the poor victims of all the nations that have been bombed into smithereens by our overlord American military-industrial complex, whose ammunitions are getting a little bit tired and old and will hit their expiry date, so they need to loosen up and do some demographics management in the low-growth countries such as Germany, Sweden, etc. All those political points aside, if you are taking in a mass number of people, you're going to have more property. That means you're going to have to do more building. Simple as that. Or you're going to have to pile people on top of each other like rodents in a cage, which is socially not particularly kind or equitable. But trust me, this rental accommodation they have planned for you is not going to be spacious. It's going to be highly efficient, one suspects, in terms of your go have a look at Japan in Tokyo type model. That's what these folk truly admire. Paying hundreds of thousands for a garage in London, or a broom closet where someone can literally crash, get up, swing a cat, get dressed, and pee all in the same one room before shuffling into the underground world of tubes train to get to their box to work from in this amazing existence and world that they want for you in this rental realm, is the game. We want freedom, we want space, we want our own homes, we want self-determination, we want liberty from the tax extracting cartel that this economist represents. And if they're concerned about all this perverse and dysfunctional, all these framing words to make it sound such a horrible thing, then they need to do something. They've taken us exactly where they want us. They're running the game. Essentially, they've created a rental class in the millennials. In fact, even those that are in their 30s and younger that can't get on the property land ladder in the West are being trained already to be this perpetual tenant class. And the dying breed, those above and older, have been pumped into the pension realm where their property is pension and ATM. And not because of home ownership, but because of the central banker cartel liquidity providing bastards that this woman represents. And she makes very, very scant comment about the fact that we have the most ridiculous low interest rates, we have an ever-expanding debt-based system, and as a result of that, assets have become perverted in valuation due to the central banking cartel that she should be criticizing, her overlord bosses. But it's us, this theme that we should own a property that's the problem, and now it's pushed them so high and the other people can't get on. No, it's the cost of money that you've created such abundance of, pushing the price right down and pushing the cost of money right down and proliferating the financialization to the extreme of every single industry right now, so that you go to America, virtually no one buys cash and only knows what their monthly payment is. This is the game, the financialization of everything, the financial system under the BIS, the central bank, the Fed, the Bank of England, and all the Western banks that have gone debt crazy. That is your problem with the soaring cost of housing and the gaping inequalities that it's caused. And you want it because as this generation dies out and the younger generation thinks they're going to inherit their property, they're going to inherit so many taxes they will be forced sellers, until just hedge funds, yes, big ass hedge funds with close relations tied to government quangos and parastatal complexes and the CEOs who attend Bilderberg meetings will be buying those properties and then at a suitable yield for themselves, letting them out on great scale to the citizenry to be tenants for the rest of their life. And this current generation that can't get on the property ladder is the first that's being trained into accepting that existence. That Zanny Minton Beddoes, editor-in-chief for The Economist, the Rothschild rag, is so keen to have us all become tenants. You want them tenants. Now you've got to remember Vitalik Buterin of Ethereum, with another professor from a think tank at one of the control structure US universities, which is typically Harvard, Yale, or Chicago, also came out with this great idea that everyone should be forced every year to, when they pay duties on the value of their home, to place a valuation on their home, and if someone else thought that they've undervalued it, be obliged and able to purchase that property off you, and you would be a forced seller if you understated the value of your home, thereby creating a Dutch auction every year whereby you could be turned out of your home, all done courtesy via the Ethereum smart contract blockchain, which is going to play a massive role in property. Your conveyancing solicitor of your or lawyer, if you're in the States, is going to come to an end. It'll be blockchain compliance, and then every home will be registered and it will be known, and anyone in the world can look up the value of your home anywhere, anyhow. All that information will be available, and you'll be open to a Dutch auction going forward. That's the ideas that are being brought forward in terms of creating greater pressure on legitimate homeowners and putting them in a position where they can be turned out. Imagine a pair of old pensioners having been forced sellers in the final 5 years of their life of their home because they've slightly been deemed conservative in their valuation for rates and tax purposes, where they are balance sheet strong and actually income poor because all the pensions are destroyed by the same central banking cartel that this woman supports, the same banking families that own the magazine that this woman works for, and have all been destroyed as pensions, and they'll be sitting on their home for their final years. They'll be turned out of their home and moved into old age home of a different variety and stuffed with a bit of cash that they're forced to sell, thanks to the blockchain, Ethereum, Vitalik, and all this thinking that is coming out of all of these think tanks, an attack of our liberty and property. Look at this framing, the West's obsession with home. Are you obsessed? Are we obsessed? No, we just like to own our own stuff. You know, we want our own patch that we can't be turned off. We want to have a place that's private property where we can tell government, central bankers to piss off. People need permission to come and see us. We don't want to be virtual clouded everywhere where we can be moved and shifted off this mortal coil at any behest of some government Bolshevik bullies. That's the situation. Moving on with this article, she even goes so far as to say down here, if you care to read her benevolent propaganda, it's hard to show whether property ownership makes better citizens. If you ignore leverage, it's usually better to own shares. Oh, fancy that. More money to be thrown into the top of the property market has the most extreme valuation. This is the new capitalism. Far higher beta equities should give a better return, and saying if you ignore leverage is the most idiotic thing to say, because I can get £500,000, I can get possibly £750,000 to buy a property on a mortgage in the UK with a moderate deposit of 10, 20, 25%. No one is giving me leverage 3 or 4x of what I have to invest in the share market. So it's inherent. Leverage is inherently an aspect of property and isn't in pensions that invest in equities or mutual funds, etc., etc. And the notion, and they're far more stable and have a far lower beta, so it's quite natural for assets that have a far more stable valuation, although you would battle to think so recently with how property has been reinflated. But that once again is part of the huge inflation that has been generated by the absolute decimation of all global currencies, globally synchronized by the same cartel that this woman works for, the families that represent, globally synchronized into asset price booms that actually never existed before. Property never goes up 50-60% in a matter of 4 or 5 years after the Great Recession, but it has now, thanks to the cartel that she doesn't attack. And ignoring leverage in property is a bit like ignoring a steering wheel in a car. It goes with the game, and it is an absolute asinine and moronic statement to even have made. So the whole notion of not building more, they just need to open it up. Oh, but the green, it means more roads, more cars. Well, you can't have it all. You're either doing your full-blown watermelon communism, or you're actually saying we're getting more people, they're living at a certain number, they want a certain amount of space, we've got to build more homes. Either build more homes and stop with the management of money and the proliferation of money, which of course you can't, because you can't put interest rates up to any normal level. Your economic overlords, old Zanny, Fanny, or whatever it is, have broken the system so entirely that there is no way we could actually have a normal benign interest rate which would be moderately supportive to property market but not hyper in asset price inflationary. So that's Fanny on property, wanting to turn you out and tell you how awesome it is to be a tenant in some undescribed, unknown, future constructed pile them high, sell them cheap tenancy environment. Also in the Economist, seeing as we're doing some Economist bashing today, let's have a little look-see at what else they had for me. They were highlighting, this is what they were highlighting. If you're following me on Twitter, you would have seen this tweet out. A pushback against the greenback. So our beloved bully state, Zionist America, as controlled by Israel, having recently awarded Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and many other pieces of things that don't belong to America to Israel, as done as commanded. The Zio state of the USA has been bullying lots of nation states and sanctioning them for many things. Anyone who's a rival, who's not supportive, gets sanctioned. We've largely had the facts reveal that Russia was not responsible for the shooting down of Ukraine Airlines, especially as there was, instead of surface-to-air missile damage, there was in fact 20-millimeter fighter plane rounds through the canopy. But anyway, it was a great reason to sanction them. Turkey got sanctioned, Russia's been sanctioned and repeat sanctioned and more sanctions, China's been threatened, various other nations. So the sanctions and the power of the dollar has been, if you don't do what we want, we start to lobby to make your life uncomfortable. Well, it's undermining the greenback. And people are thinking, why do we need to support dealing in this dollar? Because they keep threatening to remove your right to have dollar-based banking, especially when you have dollar-based debt. It's a big problem. Everything becomes more expensive for you. Many things that have to be bought in dollars. So it is this blackmail card that has been thrown around by the Zionist state of United Americans. That's not an attack on the citizens, who are generally lovely people, but just a bully boy control structure that runs behind it, like many other governments. Anyway, so you're seeing the US dollar, if I scribble with my pen, you're seeing the US dollar fall away here against other holdings. So that's 2000. Let's do our transgender pink rather, so that it's a little bit more visible. We want to stand out as transgender because we're only 0.00001%, and we really need everybody to know and act and be totally on board with our realm and raison d'etre. So we must be pretty in pink. Down she goes, down she goes. What's getting a gain? Well, the euro had a bit of a bump, but that contracted to Q3 2019. They're now accounting for the Chinese yuan. That's the brown bit. The pound. But these are all lepers in a leper colony. The varying degrees of sores and illness are like comparing one sick dog with another sick dog. But nonetheless, you're still seeing, as sanctions go up, this is the relationship. Look at this activity, this financial weapon that is being brought to bear, ever increasing. Dollar reserves go down. What this economist fails to mention, as usual, with always half-truths and part facts being their game as a Bernays-like propagandist machine, is the complete absence of gold being referenced in here. Because every single one of these is a leper, basically a fiat, a proliferated debt-based expansionary debt system, low interest rate environment, fiat-based system where you tax your citizens ever highly by reducing the borrowing power of the money, increasing the circulation of supply, only giving that supply only to your cartel of bankers that end up pushing the equity market up for the few and hollowing out the middle, and leading to loss of buying power for the poor at the bottom end, as your Gini curve ever further gets hollowed out, with 1% owning 90% of everything. So with that shell game that is being perpetuated on us by the those same central banks, it's a shocking omission on this chart not to include gold. And in fact, to correct for this omission, I'll just show you a couple of charts. Here we have, in fact, I'll just show you this one. Let's mention, and I've chosen this because it has a couple of the nations that are currently less favored nations in the eye of the great cop and bully boy of the global realm, the United Zionist State. You'll find Turkey in there, who's been under great financial Turkish lira pressure. You may remember the melt up. Well, they have in half not been buying dollars, but swinging to the gold. 50 million ounces in 15. We haven't got the final number actually for 19, but again, every single year, 2005, 10, 15, and now for 19, adding to gold reserves at an extensive rate. 50 million ounces is a huge amount. Then we have, and Turkey is quite a small country, those level of purchases are exceedingly high. Then we have China, who keeps every single ounce of its own production and yet is still buying external production from the other world, the rest of the world, the Canadian mines, the Australian mines, the South African mines, the US mines, the South American mines. This is how much she is buying, the Chinese woman. She is buying 60 million ounces in 19 and 15, on top of everything she mines herself, which is an absolute unbelievable amount, in and around 400 tons, going between 400 and 500 tons a year, guesstimation. Difficult to get real facts. Then there's our Russian friends, who are literally matching China, a little bit lagging here, but as the energy markets, as they've re-established the energy markets, they're actually at 70 million. So these same countries that have faced sanctions, India less so, although they were put under great pressure to cease, and they even made it illegal for Indians to be buying gold. They were going to Dubai to buy gold. Indians on planes were going to Dubai and smuggling it in. It became illegal. This is the same country, Modi, who also killed the two biggest notes to force the lower working class into the electronic banking tax extracting machine, and thereby inflict greater hardship on them and to sweat them out and to prevent a cash market for goods and items. Because while Bitcoin supposedly is the most dangerous money for all ill-doers and money launderers, in fact cash has always existed, and it's way more anonymous than Bitcoin, and there is no ledger or record of anyone who gave anyone else any money for any other services or goods. And once it's happened and it's not been recorded, it is gone and lost for the government to prove. And that is why they will be killing cash, and that is why India did kill their two biggest cash denominations, and they are back buying gold again. Remember that they also are the biggest holders of gold naturally for cultural reasons, and it's only during this period recently that there's such great pressure through their government, who's falling in line with the rest of the global control structures agenda, trying to prevent physical gold being taken out of the system by a culturally gold orientated nation. But they are back buying. You've even got information such as the Germans that are adding now to their bullion central bank holdings, and most of the Western central bankers are. So once again, half the truth, half the facts, half the story, comparing, keeping you framed. This is all a game of framing. The Economist keeps you framed inside the facts they want you to see, comparing one fiat to another. There is no replacement fiat to the dollar. The yuan won't become the new dollar. The euro won't become the new dollar. The pound sure as hell ain't becoming the global currency again. None of these will. They won't be trusted. They are all lepers in the same colony to varying degrees. What will probably happen is a super transnational SDR via the IMF or other system, a basket currency. So we put all the lepers together and alchemy occurs, and you actually have a high quality currency that comes out of that, because there's nothing like putting a whole bunch of lepers together to have this super healthy master race suddenly appear. But that's what they'll try. And to maybe sell it to you, they might include a certain amount of gold and count the gold assets of those various central banks, so that they keep the gold bugs and some libertarians on board, and you'll have this new currency coming out. But this comparison is comparing one sick currency to another and trying to decide which is the most sick. And in actual fact, the dollar probably is still one of the least sick, and it's certainly got the scale on its size at now, and that's not saying very much because they're all in awful condition. So the gold should be represented here. And how is Japan, China, Europe, and many of the others diversifying away from dollar, buying the precious metal? In other words, back to tangibles in this world of paper, which is totally being undermined, which is the story that should be being discussed by the central banking cartel that hired our Zanny Fanny female, tranny maybe, I don't know. I can't be the only one allowed to be transgender in this gerrymandering world of ours, but who knows. The whole point is that should be her narrative, that should be where she's focused, and we should be putting the blowtorch to the toes of Greenspan, Draghi and the likes et al. That have continued this expansionary debt system to the point of taking us to the throne, and they have coordinated it so that it will be ring a rosies, a pocket full of posies, and we all fall down together. And that is the game. And then they will bring in the new game, just like the old game, with a fresh cycle for the same psychopaths to live off you in this money proliferation debt experiment, tertiary extracting environment. What a game it is. Anyway, that's me, the Reset Sniper. Click the links below if you want to jump on board for our mini series on how we trade this. There's some incredible trades coming along in the financial reset, and you can come out of this a whole bunch better. As threatening as this sounds, actually it is not something that should provoke fear in you, but actually excitement. It'll bring the end to this overstayed, waiting for the piano to fall era, in this economic system. It'll bring on the new, and I don't think it's going to be freedom, unfortunately, for us. But if you know the game, you at least will know how to position to come out of this significantly better, and it will be a polarizing event. If you want to join our community, you can also book a call. This is the Reset Sniper. Good day, and hope you enjoyed the check-in. Watch out on the property side, how they are coming to make unpopular the ownership of property, and how the demise of the dollar with its bullying ways is actually not being fully reflected in the diversification into gold, precious metals, and in time cryptos as well, I suspect. Okay, all the best to you all. Bye for now.